I think when we look around the world, there's it doesn't take a great deal of effort to see that problems exist, right? Global problems, species-threatening problems, that order of magnitude of issues. And we can become consumed by that. It can grab our energy, our attention, our fears, our confusion, and just take it for a ride. But what I'd like to do is really step back and come into a sense of awareness about the immensity of life itself. And yes, there's some issues facing our species on this planet. That's true. And we're not denying that or diminishing the importance of that. But it's somewhat like if we had a piece of white paper, and somewhere on the paper there's a little black spot. Most of us, if we were to pick up the paper or asked to look at it, our attention would be drawn to the black spot. We'd sort of ignore the far, far greater expansive whiteness. And there's this little black spot on the paper that would pull our attention, wonder why it was there, shouldn't be there, etc. And in some sense, we're doing the same when we get, when our entire energy and focus gets pulled into there's something wrong. So we forget about, I don't know, the immensity of life, the fact that there's life at all, the fact that there's your life present, for some period of time on this earth, and all of the immense diversity of unfolding that we've experienced in our own lifetime, the opportunity to witness this incredible creation, the sense of being present for it, being aware of it, the utter mystery of that. We tend to forget that and focus on what's wrong, right? Again, it's not to diminish the seriousness of those issues, but it's also to put them within a larger perspective of what this life as a whole is. And we can easily begin to think in terms of, well, this should be or that shouldn't be happening. But when we do that, we're sort of elevating ourselves based on, our own intelligence to almost godlike status. We as individuals, me as a separate person, know what should happen and what shouldn't happen. But the reality is, whatever is happening is happening. That's the reality of it. We might like it, we may not like it, we may agree with it, maybe not. But the reality is that is what's happening. And if we argue with that, then life is going in one direction, and we're the ones saying that it shouldn't do that. Right? So we're sort of putting ourselves in the position of sort of all-knowing, an omniscient position, right? We sort of give the Creator, God, credit for, creating this amazing life, this awareness to experience everything that we've ever experienced in this life. Yeah, we'll grant the Creator that, but in these particular instances, she got it wrong, and I know which instances those are. So we can see sort of the arrogance there, when we conclude that this shouldn't be happening when it is. Okay. So the sense of should and shouldn't, it's something that we might just want to, just tone down our level of certainty. I'm not saying that poisoning rivers and earth and racial inequality and warming the climate and drone strikes on foreign countries, etc., are all just perfectly fine. I'm not saying that at all, of course, but I am saying that these things that are happening, we can position ourselves in opposition to that. Our opposition actually isn't resolving any of these issues, and it tends to have the effect of, making us angry, making us upset, stressing us out. Stress is basically holding or trying to hold two mutually exclusive, what we believe is truths at the same time. And in this case, it might be, this is happening and it shouldn't be happening. And those two things, mutually exclusive concepts that we try to hold in our mind at the same time. And that creates a stress. It creates a mental conflict in our head. Okay. So, what we can lose track of is just the absolute wonder of this creation and our ability to be aware of it, to participate in it, to both observe it and function within it. I mean, it's the absolute astonishing fact of that out of apparent nothingness, this entire creation has come to be, and our ability to notice and participate in it. But then we feel like, yeah, that's good, right? That's good, but I still feel like I have room to doubt and judge whether this particular aspect of it is really should be happening or not. God got most of it right, but I have some objections in these particular areas. So we can just sort of feel into that, how we position ourselves in that way to judge what things should and shouldn't happen. So, it's possible that we humans of the species have sort of run our course, from an evolutionary perspective, have sort of gone in a particular direction to the point that it threatens ourselves and survival of most other species on the planet. Perhaps, back in the time of dinosaurs, these giant flesh-eating animals had sort of run their course too, where they had gotten out of hand to the point of, destruction of other life forms. I'm not saying that's the case, but I also don't know that it's not the case. It seems apparent that humans, especially over the last, I don't know, 500-600 years or maybe several thousand years, have come to rely more and more on their mental capacity, which has paid off in a lot of ways, technological progress. But it seems like it's also at the same time become more and more dissociated with respect for the natural world and connection with our deepest nature. So there's been like a divergence, a dissonance that's happening where the technological advancements have, raced ahead almost like they're racing towards the cliff, and humanity is running as fast as they can to get there. And in some sense, we have, there's a similar situation happening with artificial intelligence where, we have this sort of fascination with the idea of sort of greatly expanding our intelligence through this computerized ability. But there's also the fear that it might get out of hand and, we would lose the moral capacity to hold it in line, right? So it's the fascination with it, moving ever forward, and then also the fear that it might get out of hand. We might actually lose control, and it may end up being something that we don't really want. But isn't that really what has happened? We've become so fascinated with our scientific and mental capacities to improve our life, right? To make things better, to invent things. In itself, there's no problem, but it's become such an overwhelming aspect of our life that we've lost or begun to lose sight of what our essential nature is. So it's not about throwing all technology out the window. Technology itself isn't the issue. It is our fascination with it and the belief that it is our salvation that will sort of solve our way out of these crises through more technology. All in an effort to make life better, right? More comfort, more ease, more safety, more protection, more joy, more, all in the service of enhancing our experience. But in the meantime, noticing our essential nature has become less of a priority. Begun to lose touch with, the natural world. We begin to lose touch with our deepest nature in favor of amusement and activity and busyness, mental stimulation. And when we do this, that we can feel that divergence, we can feel that loss, and yet this mental draw of progress and technology and newness and movement towards ever better, ever new forms of entertainment, stimulation. We lose sight of what is actually living this life. So as we become more and more focused on the content of our lives, we become less and less aware of the context in which our lives are being lived, right? By context, I just mean that which notices all of the content, no matter what it is, mental, physical, psychological. So when we lose sight of the essence of what's living this life, then it raises the question about who's actually living this life? You know, on what basis are we making choices about how we spend our time and energy in this lifetime if we don't know what it is that we essentially are? So what I'm saying here, I'm not making an argument, therefore do nothing. I'm not making that argument at all. I'm just, I really want to look at in whose service we choose to do something. So if we perceive an issue out in the world, you know, the first sort of layer we could look at is the belief that it shouldn't be happening, right? It is happening, but we think it shouldn't be happening, and we suffer, right? We suffer because we're opposing life. That is what's happening, and it's an idea in our head that it shouldn't be happening, and we suffer for it. Okay. So we're not making any value judgments here. We're just cutting through all of the arguments about good and bad and right and wrong, and looking at the raw reality of it is that whatever issue we see is happening, just acknowledge that that is what's happening in the moment, right? Okay, so the next layer could be, well, somebody ought to do something about it, right? Okay, but then if the issue persists, and that means whoever's supposed to be doing something about it isn't. Okay, so at this point we have an issue, and whoever's supposed to be doing something about it isn't. When we believe that they should be, we suffer again. Right? So where we're led back to is ourself. And the question is, well, am I going to do anything about it? Right? Okay, again, we have a choice. We can say, well, actually, I'm too busy. I've got better things to do. It's not that important to me. In which case, that's fine. Everybody gets to choose. But then just relinquish it. You know, if there's not sufficient caring to actually do something about it, then just let it go. No problem. I mean, I guess the other choice is just to get depressed about it and suffer, but we don't need to do that. Okay, so if we've gone through these levels of choice, you know, where we acknowledge that it is happening, whoever's supposed to take care of it isn't, and I'm left with a choice of I care about this and I want to do something about it. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay. It's good when we decide that something out in the world needs to be fixed. It's good that to acknowledge at least that a lot of the harm that's been done in the world has been done in the name of good intentions. You know, done in the name of trying to fix something that we perceive as wrong. We have a better idea about how it should work, and you know, sometimes we do, right? Sometimes we don't. You know, so we're not saying don't do anything. We're just introducing a little caution. You know, just a pause for contemplation in terms of exactly who are we doing this for? You know, are we doing it just to feel better about ourselves? If we're doing it for, you know, being respected in the community, are we doing it for fame? You know, there's lots of reasons to do things. Or are we actually doing it for the benefit of the issue? So if we decide, no, we're actually doing it, we're going to do something, and it's going to be contribute to the solution. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so what do we do? I mean, that's, we can only do what's within our capacity. If we um, imagine some grand scheme to save the world, but we don't have the capacity to do that, then it's just an idea. It's not a reality. But what do we do? I mean, do we write a check? I mean, do we, you know, send letters to our congressman? Do we, um, you know, join a Facebook group? Do we, buy a Prius? Do we, decide to garden organically? Do we feed the homeless? I mean, what specifically do we do? And it becomes readily apparent that we're not going to personally solve all of the issues that we can easily identify as being problematic in the world. And at this point, I mean, we can easily get discouraged and say, well, even if I do this or I do that, it's just such a small drop in the ocean. Is it really worth my time to do anything at all? We can go down that route. But let's say we overcome that and decide, well, no, I'm actually gonna do something. Great, wonderful. Okay, but maybe at this point we've um, sort of begun to realize that there are different ways of acting in the world. I mean, the first standard might be, first do no harm, right? Don't add to the problem by whatever actions that we take. That's sort of a low bar, but one that's often not cleared. Right? But if we just hold ourselves in opposition, we're not contributing to the resolution of any issue, and we're putting ourselves in turmoil, physically and psychologically, etc. So just holding opposition as if our opposition is going to be helpful. Um, Hopefully, we can see that doesn't work. Be nice if it did, but it doesn't work any more than being opposed to a thought in our mind is going to resolve it. It's just going to set up a battlefield, where one thought opposes whatever the other thought is. So just our holding ourselves energetically in opposition to something doesn't solve it out in the world, and we suffer for it physically, psychologically, emotionally. Okay, so what do we do, right? And again, I'm not suggesting that we do nothing, but I'm suggesting that where we come from makes a difference. If we're coming from, a belief in our own separate individual personhood, that I am the one that is going to help solve this problem, um, there whatever it is that we choose to do will tend to have the um, smell of self-interest in it. It may be very subtly, but it will still be there. The alternative is that if there's a recognition of what we truly are as being um, undifferentiated awareness with all others, then if that's held in mind, um, we may still operate in the particular, but where it is coming from has a much different scent to it. Has a greater transparency, greater tendency to be in alignment with life itself rather than from a personal objective, personal enhancement somehow. So this is really holding the larger view of life as being an amazing, just an astonishing creation that we are gifted to participate in, holding that view and then recognizing, yes, there's some issues that are important and I can lend my time and energy towards them. Wonderful. Right? But if we squander our time and energy in opposition, in fear, in depression, in anger, what resources we have will be used and unavailable in a constructive way. We will have frittered away our time and energy and intelligence in a way that is non-constructive. So that's really where I wanted to get to here. It's not that we're saying therefore don't do anything, or that problems are really insubstantial. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying that if our intention is to work with some of the issues that are very easy to identify out in the world, to do that in a way that actually is constructive. So if we are working out in the world, if we're doing it from a place of anger or opposition or fear, that will taint what we do. If we're looking to resolve things purely on that fix-it level out in the world, without recognition of the immensity of the gift that we've all been given, then whatever we do will lack any ultimate power. Right. So the possibility here is, we take our energy. One of the things you realize as you get older, you have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of energy in this lifetime. And so the question is, how do we choose to use that? Right. So we can try to fix things on the level of appearance, the level of the world. Right things that we believe shouldn't be happening, or work at that level. The other way we could approach it is to wonder, since this whole creation is so wondrous, and being in awe of its just totally mysterious nature, wonder if I'm missing something, it's not that the world is a problem, but my perspective of how I look at the world is somehow distorted somehow. Could that be a more fruitful avenue to look? Because if we don't know who it is that's actually living this life, viewing what's happening out in the world, if we don't know who that is, on what basis are we judging? The only other basis that we can judge is our conditioning, everything that's ever happened to us up to that point. But we believe that, based on our conditioning, that my opinion is right and those other fools over there, of course, are wrong, if not downright evil, right? But on what are we basing that conclusion? If we don't know who exactly is living this life, the only thing that we can base it on is our conditioned beliefs and opinions. So we might just consider the possibility of using a significant portion of this time and energy that we're allotted to investigate what it is that's living this life from a very subjective perspective, and then see if the world looks different. It's not that pollution disappears or the climate cools down. It's not. It doesn't change the world like that. But it may be that what we see as problematic in the world is a perfect reflection of the attitudes and values of humanity displayed. Consequences are displayed. So if that leads us into a bind, to the point where maybe even our species is threatened, along with quite a few other species as well. But the issues that are confronting humanity today are, as far as I can see, all of man-made origin. So, we can say that there's this problem now and I need to fix it, or we can recognize that what's appearing now is the consequence of really centuries of movement in a direction where humans have just, as the alpha animal on the planet, has gained this sense of hubris, all importance, certainty about their mental capacity, to the point that it overwhelms all other perspectives of this life. And what we see is the consequence of that belief acted out in 8 billion ways. So in that sense, what we see in this lifetime is a perfect representation of the attitude and perspective of us as a species. So we can bemoan where we've gotten to, or we can recognize that it's a perfectly legitimate place to have gotten to based on everything that preceded it. So in that sense, to say that it shouldn't happen, I would suggest that that's where everything led to. Of course it should happen. Doesn't mean that it's nice. But if we see the real root issue isn't climate or racism or economy or wealth inequalities, etc. I mean, all of those are the symptoms, not the cause. The cause fundamentally is this belief that nearly all of us humans hold, that we are separate, autonomic beings that act in our own interest. And there's consequences to that belief, and we can look around and see those consequences. So we can either try to fix things on the level of appearance, or we can go to the root. And the place to start is in ourselves. And unless we can see that within ourselves, that is not separate, unless we can see it there, how can we expect to see it in the world? How can we expect to convey it in whatever our actions are out in the world? The real work here is looking within ourself first. We do that, and then whatever we choose to do out in the world will have a different flavor about it. We don't know how that will show up, what we'll feel inclined to do, how to move, but we will move. Something will move us, and it'll have a different feel to it than when we're moving from a sense of anger, or that there's something wrong, or a sense of something shouldn't be, something's not right. What's really needed is not a sense of what's wrong, but what's constructive, what's helpful, what's a higher vision. And if we can devote some of that, again, limited time and energy, into that investigation in a sustained, honest way, then that investigation will bear fruit in the form of what we do out in the world will have authentic value. And that's the challenge, and it's the opportunity in this lifetime to come to the point where we can function from a deep sense of at-homeness in the world, deep sense of alignment with life itself, however it's showing up, and participation. Participation from that sense of spaciousness. So yes, we're not denying the black dot on the white sheet of paper, but we're realizing that without the white sheet of paper, the black dot isn't even possible, right? So we can still work on the blemish, but we can do that much, much more effectively if we're holding in awe and wonder the gift of this life.